Somewhere in a limestone cave in Ireland, archaeologists pulled two molars out of the ground that belonged to a man who died roughly 4,000 years ago. No dentist ever touched those teeth. No toothbrush, no floss, no fluoride, not even close. And when researchers actually studied them, the enamel was still intact. That's not an isolated case. Archaeological studies of ancient skulls across multiple continents and multiple time periods keep turning up the same pattern, cavity rates sitting around 1 to 2% of the teeth examined. Compare that to today, where tooth decay affects somewhere around 90% of adults at some point in their lives, and you're left with a genuinely strange question. Ancient humans didn't have dentists. They didn't have modern medicine, modern hygiene, or any real understanding of bacteria. So, why were their teeth in a lot of cases in better shape than ours? The obvious guess is that ancient people just had better genes, tougher enamel, something built into their biology that we've since lost. That guess turns out to be almost entirely wrong. When researchers actually dig into the cause, the answer isn't genetics at all. It's bacteria, and more specifically, what ancient people were and weren't feeding it. Cavities aren't caused directly by not brushing your teeth. They're caused by a specific type of bacteria, most notably one called Streptococcus mutans, that lives in the human mouth and feeds on fermentable sugars and starches. When that bacteria eats, it produces acid as a byproduct, and that acid is what slowly eats through tooth enamel, creating the holes we call cavities. No sugar for the bacteria to feed on means no acid. No acid means no cavity. It's a remarkably simple mechanism once you break it down, and it means the real story of ancient dental health isn't really about ancient humans at all. It's about ancient bacteria, and what ancient bacteria simply didn't have access to. For most of human history, that access was extremely limited. Hunter-gatherer diets, the diets our species lived on for the overwhelming majority of the roughly 300,000 years modern humans have existed, were built almost entirely around meat, fish, wild vegetables, nuts, and seasonal fruit. What's almost completely missing from that list is the exact category of food that feeds cavity-causing bacteria the most efficiently: refined carbohydrates and concentrated sugar. There was no bread, no refined sugar, no sticky, starchy processed food sitting in the mouth for hours at a time. Instead, hunter-gatherers were eating tough, fibrous, mechanically demanding food that required extensive chewing just to get through a meal, and that heavy chewing came with an accidental side effect: it naturally scraped plaque off the teeth as they ate, something a modern, soft, processed diet simply doesn't do. Then something changed, and it changed fast by evolutionary standards. Around 10,000 years ago, human populations across multiple regions of the world independently started shifting from hunting and gathering to farming, in what's now called the agricultural revolution. It's one of the most significant turning points in human history for a lot of reasons, but for your teeth specifically, it was close to catastrophic. Farming meant grain, wheat, barley, and similar crops became dietary staples almost overnight in evolutionary terms, and grain is exactly the kind of dense, fermentable carbohydrate that cavity-causing bacteria thrive on. Researchers studying the shift describe it directly: tooth decay was a rare disease throughout the late Paleolithic period, right up until agriculture entered the picture, at which point caries rates in the archaeological record start climbing sharply, and they've largely kept climbing ever since. But diet alone isn't the entire explanation. And this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. Scientists studying calcified plaque, the hardened tartar that builds up on teeth and can survive for thousands of years, have been able to extract and sequence ancient DNA directly out of it. What they found wasn't just a difference in what ancient people were eating, it was a difference in the actual bacterial ecosystem living inside their mouths. Prehistoric human mouths carried a far more diverse population of oral bacteria than modern mouths typically do. A wide, balanced mix of species rather than one or two dominant strains. As diets shifted toward farming, that balance shifted too, with disease-causing species, including the bacteria specifically linked to cavities and gum disease, becoming measurably more common and more dominant in the ancient dental record. A team analyzing calcified plaque from 34 prehistoric skeletons documented exactly this shift happening in real time across the archaeological record. Hunter-gatherers with a healthier, more varied oral microbiome, and early farmers already showing the beginning of the imbalance that still defines most people's mouths today. There's an even more direct way to see this playing out. And it doesn't require going back thousands of years at all. The Hadza, a community of hunter-gatherers still living a largely traditional foraging lifestyle in Tanzania today, offer researchers something close to a living comparison group. Studies looking specifically at Hadza populations found a measurable difference tied directly to diet, not genetics, since everyone involved shares the same ancestry. Hadza men who spend most of their time out in the bush hunting, tracking, and gathering wild food were found to have straighter teeth, less gum disease, and fewer cavities than Hadza women, who spend more time in villages eating a diet that includes more farmed, processed food. Same population, same genetics, different lifestyle, different dental outcome, which is about as close to a controlled experiment on this exact question as you're ever going to get outside of a lab. None of this means ancient humans were doing nothing at all to take care of their teeth. They just weren't doing what we do. There's evidence that early humans chewed on sticks to help clean their teeth, and used stiff grass stalks and similar tools to pick debris out from between them. Simple, improvised versions of a toothbrush and floss showing up long before anyone had formalized dentistry as a concept. Assyrian medical texts from around 3000 BCE already mention procedures aimed specifically at cleaning teeth, showing that even early civilizations understood at some basic level that dental buildup was worth actively managing, but these efforts were minor compared to what the diet itself was already doing for free. Tough, fibrous food that had to be chewed extensively was, in a very real sense, cleaning teeth as a byproduct of simply eating dinner. It's also worth being honest that this wasn't universal. Ancient dental health wasn't some flawless golden age across the board. In 2014, researchers studying one particular ancient community found extreme rates of tooth decay that couldn't be explained by farming alone. A reminder that specific local diets, specific crops, and specific circumstances could still produce serious dental problems even deep in the past. The overall pattern holds strongly across large-scale studies, but individual populations still varied depending on exactly what was available to eat in their specific environment. So what changed to get us from that low-decay hunter-gatherer baseline to today, where dental decay is treated as something close to a universal, expected part of adult life? The agricultural revolution was the first major shift, but it wasn't the final one. The second, and in a lot of ways more dramatic shift, came with the Industrial Revolution, when refined sugar stopped being a rare, expensive luxury and became a cheap, constant part of daily diets almost everywhere. Refined sucrose doesn't just feed cavity-causing bacteria, it lets that bacteria stick to tooth surfaces more aggressively and produce acid more efficiently than the natural sugars found in whole fruit or vegetables ever did. Combine an already carbohydrate-heavy agricultural diet with the sudden, widespread availability of concentrated refined sugar, and you get almost exactly the dental health landscape we're living with today, one where 9 out of 10 adults experience decay at some point, despite having access to toothbrushes, fluoride, and professional dental care that nobody in the ancient world could have ever imagined. There's something almost uncomfortable sitting underneath all of this. Ancient humans had none of the tools modern dentistry considers essential, and by a lot of measures, their teeth were doing better than ours. Not because their bodies were stronger or their genes were better, but simply because the food sitting in their mouths every day wasn't feeding the exact bacteria responsible for decay in the first place. Modern dentistry isn't failing. It's largely succeeding at managing a problem that, for most of human history, barely existed at scale. A problem we effectively built for ourselves, one grain harvest, and one bag of refined sugar at a time. The toothbrush didn't save modern teeth from a battle ancient people were losing. In a lot of ways, it's fighting a battle ancient people never had to fight at all.